you have to give up some of your, I suppose, values, or sometimes you have to fight for your own values and you guys both reach satisfaction at the same time. And so this is what we mean by compromise, which is make a deal between parties involved where each group gives out a part of their demand. What does detrimental mean? Detrimental means that it is bad, that it is harmful, and such. And so basically what this motion is trying to say is that when you have to sometimes settle for less for your, I suppose, lovey-dovey purposes, right? And will this produce a good relationship or not? And that's the motion today. And we hope you can relate to this motion and see, I suppose, maybe help solve your love conflicts or such. But yeah, next motion, please. Next motion, next slide. Thank you. So what is happening right now? As I said earlier, the motion launch happened a while ago, and that was the motion that we are debating upon. And if you kind of already forgot, the motion is right there. And the case building time specifically for the format of British parliamentary is 15 minutes. So the debate is going to start at 7:15 because we had a little bit of delay by 5 minutes. We had a motion launch at 7 earlier, therefore the case building time will end at 7:15, and that is exactly when the debate will start. And so yeah, in 1 minute, we are going to start the roll call, which is basically asking if the teams are present and such, and then the debate is going to start. So please wait for that. Thank you so much. Right, so it's 7:15. I'm going to start a roll call. OG, are you present? Opening government, are you present or no? I'm gonna count. 3, 2, 1. Okay. I'm gonna move on to OO. Opening opposition, are you here?
We're here.
Right. Thank you. Closing government, are you here? Closing government. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Closing opposition, are you here? Closing opposition, do you happen to be here or no? All right. I'm gonna start again from OG. OG, are you here?
Yeah.
Right.
OG here.
All right. CG, are you here?
CG is here.
All right. CO, are you here?
Here.
All right. Thank you. So yeah, that's for the roll call. I shall give the platform to our adjudicator now. For Ranga, time is yours. Thank you.
All right, so thank you everyone. My name is Ranga and I will be the chair for this round. In other words, I'm the adjudicator for this round, or in Bahasa, you might refer to this as the jury. So yeah, I would be role playing as the judge in this debate. Without any further ado, I welcome the Prime Minister to open the government case.
First, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, then I'm going to set up my timer. My preferred PRI method is through the chats, because don't interrupt me during my speech. Okay, I'm starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. What are our stance? Two things. First, we prefer a world where compromise is detrimental, because in the status quo, what your neighborhood told you, what the narrative told you, is that you have to sacrifice something in order for your relationship to be considered as a good relationship. Because if you do not compromise anything, then you won't be having a good relationship, because you don't make any sacrifice, right? We think this is the narrative that happened in the status quo. Second, I think this debate is not talking about people that both party fully consented, and not talking about a very small compromises, because in both side of the house, this won't be a problem anyway, right? Because regardless if they compromise or not, the relationship will be good anyway, and the effect will not be significant anyway. Therefore, we think the stance that the opposition should take was not to, oh, you have to sacrifice small thing and area, but we're talking about a bigger thing, right? We are talking about when you compromise the value that you hold dearly before you get into the relationship, the ideology that you hold dearly before you get into the relationship, or the basic mindset that you already planted for such a long time before you marry or you get into a relationship with the person, right? So what are the parameters of good relationship in the status quo? First was that you have to sacrifice the whole time, because you don't want to hurt your partner. You must not fight, for example, because at the end of the day, it is not considered as a good relationship. You have to compromise, or you have to ngalah, for example. Second, if there's a problem, then you have to try as hard as you can to sacrifice your belief and to sacrifice your value, because then if not, then it's very hard for you to do the problem, right? So that's why then the burden of proof from the opposition was not to define why compromising is good only, because the compromising is a universally agreed idea, but why then the narrative that told you to compromise so much things is fine, even when it's the most important thing of part of your life, because the idea of compromising is very simplistic if you're only talking about people care to each other and yada. Therefore, our goal under OG is very simple. We want a healthier relationships, right? Two things I'm going to bring in my speech was that first, why then compromising is not a good parameter for a good relationship. Second, I'm going to talk about the trade-off, why even if the compromise was fully consented, I'm going to be very charitable to the base case of the opposition, whether it's still fine, or whether even if under our side the people are very stubborn to begin with, whether it's perfectly fine, right? Let's talk about the first one. When we're talking about the parameter of a good relationship and status quo, a good relationship defined by how much you can compromise your stuff during the period of you having a relationship with your girlfriend, right? For example, of how then the last fight that you have, because you need to sacrifice your thing, that become the parameter of how good your relationship is. Compromising here means that you're not only sacrificing small things like you lending your phone, or you lending your remote TV or something like that. It's not something like that, right? It's compromising means something way bigger. It's something that sacrificing your dreams, for example, sacrificing the belief that you hold, for example, or sacrificing the value, right? Because we think if the compromise they talk is in a very bare minimum, then their whole benefit of opposition will be also in the bare minimum, right? Therefore, they cannot take this case. But why then a good relationship should not be defined by how much the thing that you compromise? 3 layers. First, the idea of relationship is finding the best partner of yourself. It means that the compromise should be on the minimum bare possible, because then that's the idea of why you start the relationship, right? Second was that the rationality when you fall in love is very low under the status quo, and this is worsened by the idea that you have to compromise because everyone is so different. For example, you are going to over glorify by this narrative to the extent that, oh, when you opt into a relationship, that you are going to compromise so much thing, and you have to do that. For example, third layer was that it's harder for you to opt out because then you have to compromise stuff when you will break up, for example, because in the end of the day, you have to compromise this kind of thing in order for your relationship to be able to sustain, right? I think this is toxic, right? Because the idea of relationship in the very first place was to minimum the harm, right? Because it's better in our side because the good relationship parameter is defined by how less you compromise it. What does this look like? This looks like that we think people are going to search for the most middle way when they're fighting, for example. We're going to find a way that the compromise can be at the minimum bar possible, for example, right? So that's why at the end of the day, instead of forcing one party to compromise as big as possible, we think under our side of the house, we're going to as possible to minimize this kind of compromising, because compromising or sacrificing your stuff is very detrimental for your relationship. For example, in government, you're going to like glorify the idea of compromising because this is very this is very universally good. For example, because at the end of the day, it is something that's very normalized. For example, and also we don't normalize this thing because we think compromising or compromising, no matter how good the idea is still having a harm, right? It's still having an opportunity cost, for example. That's why we think it's more sustained under our side, because the less you compromise, the less trial and error you get, right? The idea in government, when they normalize this kind of thing, that's why then the opportunity cost is way bigger under your side of the house. Because in best case scenario, let's say that you manage to, having a very good relationship, but behind that, you already make so many compromises, and this is an already opportunity cost to begin with. Under our best case scenario, we think if these people can find the lowest, compromise possible, and this is likely because first, when we change the mindset of the narrative, which means before people start the relationship, they will be very picky, and we think it's very fine to do so. Second, we think after in a relationship, you still hold with you strong dearly, right? Minimize the cost, because the reason why you opt out in relationship is to minimize this harm, right? When compromises is the main actor, we think how good your relation will be bad anyway, right? But in the worst case scenario, I think even if people are stubborn, it's okay, right? Because we're not talking about something that's very racha-racha, for example. We're talking about a bigger value, like the dreams you're talking about, the value that you hold dearly for years, for example. This is the thing that you cannot, sacrifice just because of you're over glorified by the love of the relationship, right? I think this is way more important to begin with, because this is shaped by years of consideration, for example, in comparison when you compromising this thing just because of very temporary thing that probably overcloud your decisions. We think it's very toxic. But then lastly, we think even if end of the result of the house, let's say that the compromise was accepted by both sides, which is their best case scenario, or I'm going to very charitable, because three layer. First, as individual, you have these dreams that you already prepped for so long. The one when you opt into the relationship, which means that this thing there are something that you have to trade off, right? There's something that you cannot work for it. This is worse because to some extent you are going to even if you agree to this, in the deepest heart you are going to set anyway, and this is the harm anyway. But even if you are happy, this is not fully your consent, because at the end of the day you don't have the 100% considerations, because you are forced by the externalities, you are forced by the people itself. This is why then we think we're very proud to open.
All right, thank you for that speech. Now, before we continue to leader of opposition, I can probably say to the speakers that I encourage you to turn on the camera so that our freshmen here can see your wonderful faces as well. But unfortunately, I cannot turn it on myself because IndyHome has a very low bandwidth. So yeah, with that said, we continue to leader of opposition to begin the opposition case here.
Test. Am I audible? Sorry, I also cannot turn on my camera because my internet sucks. So I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. In opposition, we define that the ability for you to compromise is something that is necessary to create a good relationship. So we're fine with couples taking or making cuts to fit in with their partner. So we don't think it's going to be harmful, and we're going to defend why it is a better parameter in comparison to compatibility that opening government wants to push. So several pieces of framing. One, I think in opposition we'll still defend one's choice to opt out of toxic relation. For example, when there's mental or physical abuse involved, it's going to be fine if they want to opt out of it, because it's literally there's another choice. But the second thing to say is that what we're going to argue is that what you need to understand is that the context of reasonable process of falling in love. I don't think it's going to be as extreme as they say, right? I don't think a liberal leftist will fall in love with a racist bigot, right? We think that when people fall in love, I think that it is most likely through several steps. For example, they know each other's preferences, they share each other's ideal. For example, I think that these are the more reasonable and realistic steps of falling in love, right? We think that before one wants to opt into relationship, I think that there's several stages, right? For example, they will ask themselves a lot of questions. Is this guy really someone I want to spend the rest of my life with? Is this guy really compatible with me? So I think that there's a lot of rationalization process that is involved, and we don't think, you're going to want to date someone that you don't even know what political alignment they are in, right? So we think that I don't think the compromise will be as extreme as Goff will talk about. But even if it's going to be quite extreme, let's explain the process of compromising, right? We don't think compromising is a simple, several minute talks and agreement, right? We think that when there's a compromise in a relationship, I think that there's going to be quite a long process, right? First, I think that couples will first of all talk about their problem, right? They will explain their differences on what they don't like about their partner and what they wish their partner changes, right? But after that, I think that there's going to be process of negotiation. For example, they give chances to their couple to defend themselves, why they do those stuff, or why do they think like that. We think that there's going to be a process of explanation before everything. But lastly, I think that there's going to be giving proposals and bargaining, right? The partner will say what does he or she wants, and then there's going to be negotiation and counter proposals here and there, for example. So there are several things that you need to know. First, that there's going to be a time frame of which that gives people time to rationalize their decision. This is to say, people will have the time to take into account multiple variables. For example, how much time, energy, and money they have spent on some particular individuals, and in the end will make a rational decision ultimately whether they decide to compromise or not. But two, we think that the most likely way that compromising will materialize is that it will be done by both sides. For example, after the bargaining, I think both sides will have some pieces cut. I think that there's going to be trade. For example, what are the trades that you will compromise in exchange for what kind of changes? I think this will be done by both sides of the deal. But third of all, I think that most likely, the standards that are set will be reasonable, because there's going to be a lot of check and balances from each other, defending themselves and telling what is, changing the demands and such here and there. So this, in conclusion, one, I don't think that the compromise that our standards that we push will be that toxic or unreasonable. But even if it's quite big, there's going to be changes here and there. I think that the partners will change their mind, for example, when they understand the reason as to why their partners do some stuff, and I think the standards will be changing over time in the process of the compromises. So that is our framing and what you need to understand. So two positive contribution then. Why then it is worth it? Under two layers. One, why their side will lose the exclusive benefit of relation, and secondly, why then preparing for future problem can only be done in opposition. But before that, several framing. One, I think you need to understand that difference in relationship is normal. Like, you're not going to be able to find a 100% compatible partner, because I think that inevitably there's going to be disagreement and differences in your standards and habits, for example, because everyone have different upbringing and life experience that shapes their preferences and dreams or goals, for example, right? But the second thing why it's not likely you can find a 100% compatible partner is that when you're in the process of pendekatan, I think that it is more often than not, you put up a fake front, right? You are willing to make changes to yourself here and there to hide some of things that you don't want your partner to know. So this is why, but third of all, I think that even they themselves told you that when you fall in love, you're not rational, right? So these are the reasons why it's not likely for you to be able to find a 100% compatible partner, and why then to a certain extent there will be conflicts that will happen inside your relationship. But why is it worth it? Second framing, we think that a relation have two, distinct contribution that no other form of why there is two exclusive contribution that romantic relation have that no other relation has. Probably, for example, like safe space, for example, that lets you be yourself, and a breathing room, for example, when everyone other people impose certain standards to you, for example, or there's things like commitment, for example, that makes your partner stay with you irrespective of the changes, right? What are going to be happening in golf? In golf, you're going to force everyone to keep up with the demand, or there's no process of bargaining or compromising. Then we think that the relation will lose its exclusive benefit, because committed relation will just be like other aspect of life, for example, workplace or education, but there's no compromises, and there's going to be just new and rising standard. At worst, when they can meet the standard, I think that there's going to be breakup. It's hampered your productivity and makes you lose a lot of opportunity cost. But in the moderate scenario, when they can meet the standard, I think it's very tiring. The second positive contribution that we're going to say is that you need to compromise to prepare for future problem. Three variables that will never change. One, people always change. For example, new life experience will change people and how they think. Secondly, we argue that new challenges or life problems will arise. For example, every generation have their problems. But lastly, we think that the wheel of life will always turn, right? You cannot always be the person you are, and the environment surrounding you will inevitably change. So understand that there is going to be a lot of change that happens in your life. You can, even if you're compatible 100% right now, when you suddenly lose all of your money, or you lose your job, or you encounter new life problem, for example, there's going to be changes, right? So we think that it is necessary to habituate and normalize compromises in a relationship to prepare for all of this. We think that it is necessary, and for a good relationship, very proud to propose.
All right, thank you for that speech. Now, to close the case of open incumbent, I welcome the second speaker of open incumbent. Here.
Hi, sorry, I cannot turn on the camera because I think the laptop is something wrong with the laptop. Yeah, that's it. Okay. So.
Your voice is kind of small.
Yeah.
Is it just me or?
Wait.
Fedora suaranya kurang keras kayaknya. Aku doang apa?
Ini udah.
And anyone else give me
Ini udah denger
confirmation?
belum?
Iya, aku kedengaran sih.
It's clear on me, enggak?
Oh, wait. Okay, should be okay now.
Ini udah.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay, start my speech in 3, 2, 1. So I will only have one substantive in the speech, but before that, I'm just going to go with the rebuttals, right? Number one, when they say that, we can still opt out of the relationship, this is so toxic. Number one, with this cannot be a fight, right? Because this needs to be like it needs a heavy likelihood where you can opt out, right? Because it's harder, because when you already start in a relationship, you're already pushed by the society that when you opt into a relationship, you have to be ready to compromise, which means that you are more likely to have seen as a failed products in society. On the other side, it's better, exactly, because when you opt out of the society, you can give this high expectation, because the relationship heavily centered in yourself, and people normalize the idea of prioritizing yourself over the other people. Secondly, they also say that the partner will be changed, standard changes biggest benefit for them. Right? So responses. Number worst.
Fedora, wait, seem to be putus-putus.
Worst thing, why this is so good. Secondly, this also.
All right, never mind. Oh, okay.
Wait,
Suaramu tadi putus-putus.
Pindah device dulu aja.
Alright.
Oke, ya udah, aku pindah device dulu.
Yeah, sure.
Hello.
Yeah, you're audible now.
Wait.
I lost you around ketika kamu bilang relationship should be centered on yourself. Basically, the end of your first rebuttal. Lost you around that. So yeah.
Dari yang mana?
The end of your first rebuttal.
Okay.
Apa namanya? Ya.
Okay. Enggak, 2 set. So second rebuttal, when they say that partner will change their mind, standard changes because this is the biggest benefit from them, right? This doesn't prove that why the standard will changes into a better side in their set house, right? They need to prove when the standard goes much worse, why this is still good in their set house. But secondly, this also means that the first reason why they start a relationship is gone, right? And why this is what you call as good relationship when the reason when your good relationship is not in line with the reason it starts. Secondly, but even if this good, there's still opportunity cost instead of this. They don't explain why this is okay to take, right? When the only person you can trust, 100% you can trust is yourself, because this doesn't rely on externalities. You have 100% control of yourself. So this is my substantive why compromise is the only thing if you want to have a relationship, and why this is exactly going to be bad. So there are two scenarios actually when you do compromising. Number one, this will be good and beneficial. But secondly, when one party doesn't consent. Let's look one by one, right? When this is good and beneficial, why this is still bad? I think that when you wanted to opt in into a relationship, most likely people will be so irrational, right? When you wanted to do that PDKT kind of thing, you will wanted to do 24/7, for example, to chat them, asking what you're doing and etc., asking what you like and etc., in order you can engage what kind of thing that she likes, and having the kind of the connection between you two, in order you can have a well established conversation, etc., in order you can establish the relationship. This shows you that even when you start dating, you are already started to not be irrational, because the idea of love is you cannot detect it, right? It might come anytime. You cannot predict what kind of person that you can fall in love to. So most likely when you fall in love to that certain people, you become so irrational that it's very likely for you to just agree to sacrifice your belief, value, and dream to in order to engage that person, in order they can also like you. So that's why when you do PDKT, it's you will start to do compromising. This is also unlikely because you're already when you see that person is something that so beautiful and etc., you only like that person. You will not see any other person. That is why you feel like this she's the only one that you can get, and that's how you became so irrational. So that is how, even if it bring benefit and good, even if you are happy when you do compromises, you are being so irrational. That is how it's not going to be beneficial. The harm is when you do break up, this is going to be very hard for you to find the new one, exactly because the idea of relationship is already scary for you, right? Because when you let go your dream, because you do compromises, because of wanted to have a relationship with that girl, you need to stop or slower your progress in achieving your dream. So it means that if you wanted to do that again after you are already breaking up with this man, it's going to be very much harder for you because other people go so far, for example, and you're already left behind. That is how you become so insecure, for example, that you will not achieve that dream at the end of the day. So that is why even at best you can be happy when you do compromises. The certainty of the relationship itself to be a long term and make you happy in a longer term, this is still uncertain, exactly because all the compromises will be so tiring. That is how this will only be traumatizing for you to opt in into a relationship at the end of the day. But second scenario, second scenario what happen in opposition is that one party will not consented. Why this is going to be so bad, right? Exactly because when you want to compromises, there will be someone who are submissive and there will be someone who are dominant, right? So it means that the submissive will be more likely to only glorify the idea of keep doing the compromise and keep agreeing to the dominant. That is how you can, like, for example, keep accepting what kind of like sex position, for example, when you do also you don't really like, or that sex position, for example. That is why you cannot like really like say that there is something that you don't want to do because you're already being that submissive, that you don't want to make him angry, angry, because this will something that will make him left you, for example. No, thank you. No, left, for example. That is how you will only a toxic relationship will be so likely what happen to you. Okay.
What about the idea of chivalry and
Yeah.
positive masculinity that is now in rising, where men needs to subside to their women and actually protect them, exactly because they see their women as an important object in which their social status depends on?
I think I already explained to you that why even if like those kind of beneficial thing will happen in your set of house, this will not be beneficial exactly because like for example Alpha has already explained that this will not based on the consent of those both parties. Like there's something that you need to trade off in order you can go get those kind of benefit, right? So that's how even if like those kind of exist, this will not beneficial. But lastly, why even if negotiation like what opposition claim to you, it's not going to be happening in their set of house because before every because I think we think that this narrative is already overclouding the society, right? That compromise is the best thing. Most likely, the things that you need to trade off is things that is not beneficial for a capitalistic of the belief that is for that the dominant is believing, right? Like for example, the dominant is believing something like hustle culture. This is going to be like very unlikely for this person to make compromise because they compromise when the partner wanted to have a picnic chill day, for example, because it doesn't bring any profit. This is how it's more likely for you to just like as submissive to just accept and agree that indeed what your partner believes is the best for both of you. Meanwhile, this is something that, for example, you need to trade off because you are already that stressed and you wanted to have a picnic. Meanwhile, your partner doesn't want to do this just because this doesn't bring any profit. So it means that if you wanted to change the standard, it means that the opposition have a very big burden to prove so if the standard gonna be like going to the betterment of the relationship. If people already believe that something that they already trust, so it means that the compromise is going to be unlikely to happen in their set of the house as well. That is how those benefits will not unlikely to happen. That's why we propose. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that speech. Now to close the opening half, I welcome the second speaker of opening opposition.
Check. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Bentar. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. When OG told you that they want a world where little to no compromises are made, we simply think that it's not viable, right? If you want to have little to no compromises, it means that you have to find someone that really suits your mindset, ideology, and whatnot, right? Which is very, very hard to do. To do because humans are just very diverse. Everyone have their own mindsets. Everyone have their own ideology, for instance, and it's very hard for you to find someone that really, really suits you, right? Especially when there are so many people in this world, it's very hard for you to find someone that really suits you among thousands of people that exist in this world, right? I think that it's very uncertain and gacha-like if you want to go with the case of OG finding someone that is 100% compatible with you, right? Especially when my PM have already told you how humans are very dynamic, how ideology can change over time, for example. I think that it makes it very, very hard for you to find someone who could constantly suits your preferences, right? But comparatively, under our side, you might already have someone who you're happy with, right? Someone who have different political stance, but is very funny and can make you laugh your ass off, for example. I think that when that's the case, you should set aside your differences. You should make compromises. It's okay for you to make compromise in your political stance, for example, so that you can clinch on that person whom you're happy with on the current status quo, right? So I think that happiness is what really matters in this debate in a relationship, and you should focus on that, not on like trying to really uphold your ideology and whatnot, right? I think that in the end, if you are happy with your relationship, it's fine even if you make compromises, right? But I'm going to give several responses towards OG, right? Number one, they told you on how there will be how under our side with people being willing to make compromises and whatnot, there will be someone who's submissive to the other, for example, right? And it's going to be very harmful when that happens. I don't think that this is true because the idea of compromises under our side is going to be distributed equally to all people, right? To both person in a relationship, right? We're not going to just told one person to be to make compromises and the other to not make compromises and just accept whatever the other partner told the other partner would want to do, right? We're going to tell all people equally that compromise. The idea of compromises is good, and you should try to make as much as much rational compromises as possible if you want a good, healthy relationship, right? So therefore, what's going to happen under opening opposition is not one person being submissive to the other, but both parties willing to engage in a discussion with a mindset of willing to compromise, right? Therefore, the discussion that partners will engage in, if there happens to be a conflict, will be more healthy, and there will be better likelihood for you to find the solution to like solve that problems, right? So therefore, healthier relationship is going to be happen under our side, and there's no one that's going to be like very submissive to the other, right? But secondly, they also told you on how love is irrational, and how you're going to be very irrational to compromise your dream just to be with your partner and whatnot. No, thank you. And there might be other people out there that can also fulfill your demand and give you happiness, right? To respond to this, I don't think that this is true. I don't think that love is irrational, especially when you've gone through a lot of considerations before you engage in a relationship with someone, right? You've considered their background, for instance. You've considered their how they behave around you, for example, right? There are so many considerations that you have made before you engage in a relationship. So therefore, I don't think that it's a very irrational thing that you just decide on a whim, right? But secondly, I don't think that I don't think that making sacrifices is not I think that making sacrifices is perfectly okay in this debate, especially and making sacrifices, like sacrificing your dreams just for the sake of clinging onto your partner, is perfectly fine, because ultimately in the end of the day you're happy with that, right? The idea of dream and goal is not absolute. It's not absolute, that. For example, last year you might want to be a doctor, but now you might only want to be together with your partner, for example, because that brings you happiness. So I think that the idea of a dream is not absolute, and you should try to take into consideration you should take every single thing into consideration, right? And love is also one of them. So yeah, I think that it's perfectly fine if someone compromises their dream just to be with their loved one, because that brings them happiness and that's what matters to them, right? And you should also respect that. And it's morally incorrect for you to just say to them that it's not okay to be with your loved one. You just have to pursue your dream to be a doctor, for example. I think that everyone should be free to choose whatever they want, and love is also one of them. But no, thank you. But lastly, Oji also told you on how under their side, people will push to find a middle ground and make less compromises as possible. I don't think that one response to this. I don't think that this is viable. I think that it's very hard for you to do so, and it's going to take a lot of time, especially because the two of you are very different, and you are both unwilling to make compromises, right? What's most likely going to happen under your side is that you're going to engage in a very, very long discussion, a very, very deadlock discussion that's not going to be fruitful, right? Because you both stubbornly clinch onto your stance, for example. That's why conflict is what you're going to get under their side, right? Because no one is willing to make compromises. And I think that conflict is generally bad in a relationship, because none of you are going to be happy in that relationship, and that unhappiness is constantly going to happen if you don't make compromises and continuously spark conflicts, right? Comparatively, under our side, when both parties are willing to make compromises, the discussion, if you face conflicts, is not going to be deadlock. You're going to have a more healthier discussion, because the two of you engage in that discussion without like having a stubborn mindset, right? You're willing to make compromises. You're willing to hear what other people have to say, and that's why you're going to have a healthier relationship, because there will be little to no conflicts that happens under our side. So therefore, if you want a healthier relationship, you should go for team. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that speech. Now, to open the closing half of the debate, I welcome the fabulous member of government.
Tes. Am I audible? Terus suaraku nggak cutting kan?
No, you're loud and clear.
Okay, I don't think I can turn on my camera because it's just quite bad here, the internet connection. Okay. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Several points of responses towards opening opposition first, right? In their side of the house, they constantly say to you that, oh, in your side, the compromises will be ideal, right? Because in both sides of the house, they will take care of each other. They will understand. Both of the partners will be compromising each other's individuality, right? I don't think this case is likely if they don't want to answer or engage or prove why. Then there will be asymmetric. The relationship will be symmetric, right? Because in most of the case, relationship are going to be asymmetrical, right? First, there are a situation where your partner are a lot smarter than you, then or have a better career than you. Then when these people wants to have a kids, for example, the one that have to resign from their job is the other partner that is not their career is not that bright in itself. Or secondly, when you live in a situation of patriarchal community, then the women are going to be a lot more disadvantaged inside the relationship, right? The only response or POI that Op try to say to this is that, right now, our situation are already progressing, right? There are positive masculinity and etc. So I think the only equal relationship that they're gonna have in opposite side of the house is those kind of the only good relationship will happen in progressive community, right? Well, in this debate, these compromises also happen in a community where those progressivity doesn't exist. Thus, the women are going to be constantly sacrificed in their side of the house, right? Secondly, they never prove why then this irrationality would not overcloud the decision making of this person how this person inside the relationship going to create decision, right? That's why they lose in their side because they never wants to engage to their worst case, right? Comparatively, CG will engage to our worst case, right? What if we are going to have a conflict because we don't want to compromise, right? Like what OG has told you, these compromise are going to not going to be talking about like what food you want to have today, right? But it is going to talk about things like dreams, things like your future plan, things like your career and etc. Right? In our side, if there are conflict because your partner cannot understand your dream, cannot understand your drive for having a better career, then it is perfectly fine, right? In our side, to not have this kind of partner anymore because they are super selfish, right? They think that their career is more important than your career, so you should stay at home, right? They are the kind of selfish partner that only care about themselves and doesn't care about your opinion, right? They don't care about what having this dream can be a source of happiness to you, right? That's why, in the end of the day, it is not good to have this kind of partner. The only response from Satvika is to tell you that, dream can change, right? That's why it is not important to prioritize that. Then, I think this is super evil, right? Because just because dream can change in future doesn't mean you have to eradicate people's ability to enjoy this dream or pursue this dream first, right? Because in future they might feel regretful, right, and unhappy. They are going to wonder, what if I actually pursue my dream to be a doctor in the past, right? I might be super successful and have lots of money right now, but look where am I right now, right? I'm a stay-at-home mom with no income and and my husband is not so caring to me anymore, right? Like before. That's why those kind of things, these kind of people are going to be super disadvantaged in the opposition side of the house, right? Let's jump to my substantive, right? What is going to happen in CG then? CG is different from OG, right? OG constantly told you that, they explain goodly that, these compromises aren't bad, yada. But they never explain to you why the relationship is going to be really good in government side of the house, right? Where the moment you have this individuality or the moment you don't compromise, you don't normalize compromises, right? In our side of the house, because you don't normalize people to compromise, then the decision making or the way people think in their mindset is that, the first thing that I have to do the first thing that I have to think about when I want to create a decision for a relationship is that I have to prioritize my individuality, right? I should not sacrifice my dream for this partner and extra, right? That's why in our Saturday house, these people are going to be a lot more happy and the relationship are going to be a lot more sustainable. Why is that, right? Because first, I think because you prioritize your individuality, then the first option is not to compromise, right? Your first option is to prioritize your own interest and situation. What does the example of this is that first, when there is a job, when your partner have a job opportunity overseas, right, and they want you to move in with this person, go overseas with this person, leaving all of your family, leaving all of your friends, leaving your educations, right? If you constantly going to compromise, you are going to think that, because I want to pursue and protect this relationship, I'm going to live my life here in Indonesia and move with this partner overseas, right? Even if I don't have safety net in those overseas. The comparative in our Saturday house, when you don't compromise, you don't normalize compromise, then you are going to think, I don't want to do that, right? Because I think my dream here and my family here is important. I want to stay in Indonesia, and we just have LDR, right? In a moment, after several years, if I still love you and I already have good education, I can move with you, right, overseas, have a job there because I already have good education, for example. So in our Saturday house, it's not like people are not going to compromise at all, but the first, the way they create decision making are going to be super different, right? They are going to prioritize their interest and well-being first before they opt into this kind of relationship, right? Before they want to opt into with this kind of partner and spend the rest of their life with this partner, right? That's why in our side, it is going to be a lot better, right? Because then the interests of both partners are going to be catered better, right? There will be discussion that they want to have in opposition, right? Because you are going to discuss, this is my interest and this is your interest. Let's find the middle ground, right? To make sure that this relationship actually works and doesn't sacrifice anyone's interest, right? That's why it is actually better in terms of also discussion. In their Saturday house, it is going to be bad, right? Because at best, you can compromise and these people are going to feel okay right now. It is not going to be sustainable, right? It is going to create future conflict, right? Why? Because they are this partner that constantly sacrificing, they are going to think, I have sacrificed so much for you. You should not actually leave me, right? You should stay in this relationship with me forever, even if they don't love each other anymore. Or secondly, they are going to, if these partners that sacrifice themselves future are actually not great, they are going to blame this partner, right? This is because of you, right? That I don't have a good job right now, right? That's why those kind of conflict, future conflict, are exactly going to happen in opposition side of the house. In our side of the house, because there will be no regret when they opt into a relationship, because they constantly prioritize their happiness first, because they go inside the relationship, those exactly are going to be hindered and would not happen, right? That's why for a happier relationship, we beg to propose. Thank you.
Right, thank you for that speech. Now to open the case of closing opposition, I welcome the opposition.
Am I audible? So sorry, I can't turn on my camera. If you want a POI, you can just unmute your mic. Just wait. Okay. Setting up my timer. I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. As closing opposition, we believe that compromise is important within a relationship, right? Especially when we're actually achieving the good relationship that we actually want. A few framings. 1, we define that good relationship is exactly both sides are happy with the decisions that they've made, even if they do compromise in the end, right? Notice, within the relationship, of course, they're still going to talk with each other first, their future goals, dreams, and etc. Because of that, we think there's still communication that is important for these kind of couples, right? So not suddenly they're going to compromise all values anyway, right? We think that is an extreme case scenario that happens anyway, and that is not our burden to prove so. 3, the new contribution from CO. I'm going to context, for example, patriarchal society, right? Where exactly with this kind of compromises, those men that are exactly, for example, patriarchal are going to cater towards these women through positive masculinity. I'm going to prove why compromise is exactly the prerequisite of actually doing so. A few rebuttals. Firstly, opening government talks about like compromise is exactly bad because even if you do feel a certain benefit, it's still exactly uncertain of being happy within long term. Within government's happiness is exactly not certain either, panels. Notice in relationship, right? There is obviously a disagreement that may happen anyway. This agreement is exactly going to happen because you want something else than your partner exactly wants. When you as an individual goes with government side of the house, exactly when they don't have any sort of compromises, right? That's where their relationship are going to fall apart. Within this is exactly worse because then no sort of good relationship or sustainability will be there under government side. But B, even if the happiness is not exactly certain because there is conflict within opposition anyway, or CO, we think it's okay because we say that this kind of conflict and finding compromise is something that is actually making a relationship sustainable, that you're willing to give up something for the sake of relationship. It becomes an evaluation process for yourself, right? About how you can actually adapt to your surroundings anyway. We think that that is exactly important on actually creating a good relationship. That's why it's still important to compromise. Two, opening government talks about, there's going to be someone that is like super submissive within this kind of relationship. We think this is a very extreme case scenario, right? If in opposition we're suddenly going to have like a very submissive person, then government is also going to be very stubborn when finding someone, or even at best they do find someone, they're suddenly going to cut them off anyway. We think this is exactly like both extremes, and we don't think that you can use this kind of argument for your weighing anyway, adjudicators. I'm going to jump into my arguments, right? First argument, let's talk about like why compromise is exactly necessary. Compromising looks like they may give up something for the sake of relationship, right? But notice they're still like talking and communicating about what the relationship is exactly going to look like, what futures they want. We think that that's okay because what compromise is finding the middle ground for two people. Notice this is inherently like not all humans say same anyway, right? So why is okay? One, within relationship, they already consented to opt into it, and even if they've already talked it out, right? Within this consent is exactly valid because they've already seen other alternatives. For example, they know that there are other eligible people out there that could be considered as new relationship, but the fact that they already opt in, that means they're okay with the compromises that may happen. But the fact that they choose this relationship anyway, right? They know the compromise will always be there, and they're fine with it because of they try to find the ground where they're okay with the decisions that these both parties exactly make. Through the process of communication, right, they see which ground is they can agree upon, then that consent still stands and is justified anyway. Two, compromise is something that is normal within society and status quo. Parallel example, like whether to make good relationships or friendships with friends, you compromise a part of you to adapt to your surroundings. The benefits of doing so, right, exactly having a sustainable friendship, a relationship with other people, for example, for the future when you want to opt into something new, then why is that necessary? Because this also explains the sustainability within good relationship, that you should compromise for your future together. In creating good relationship, right, you need that sustainability. But notice within compromise, it is also showing an important like indicator that you are also loyal and mature enough to with your partner. What happens in government? At best, if there is something that has to be compromised, right, and like of course there is, because you're still humans that have like different opinions too. For example, at best you're gonna push to break up, right? We think this is exactly like showcasing the immaturity of that is exactly happening within government. That is exactly why under government their biggest harm, they're not gonna find any sustainability. Two, it's gonna take like a super long time to actually find someone eligible enough for you with those kind of high standards and where you are exactly so stubborn to do so. That is exactly the worst. That is exactly going to be worse under government anyway. And in opposition, at least we're still better. That compromise is better for you to find good relationship. Second argument, let's talk about our new contribution, right? How we're going to make sure that these men within like patriarchal society, for example, actually helps women through like positive masculinity and male chivalry. What does compromise do? Right? You have to give some of your ideals for the sake of your relationship that is able to sustain. Why this is especially important? Notice that positive masculinity is also like rising up to accommodate like helping women, even if there are within patriarchal society. Positive masculinity exactly looks like, a real man is a a real man or a masculine man is exactly a man that respects women, that knows consent, and etc. Notice men within like patriarchal society somehow see masculinity as something that has to be super upholded by these men, right? That's why even if they're not as progressive, they still will try to fulfill that standards within relationship. Why then compromising is exactly the prerequisite, right? Although patriarchy, they still have to fulfill that masculine standards. Then the positive masculinity is able to push men to actually do this male chivalry. What will it look like, right? Actually, like respecting women, actually make sure that women are able to feel heard within relationship. Why that is exactly important, especially within this debate. Within the most vulnerable actor here is exactly women that has been like disenfranchised with by the patriarchal society, especially within these relationships. Then what happened in CO, right? We exactly are going to accommodate these women even if they do live within patriarchal society. Within this relationship, exactly the man will try to like listen to the women anyway, will try to listen to the women. That is exactly important for these women. What happens under government, right? When they don't have any sort of compromise when trying to find a relationship, is exactly going to be worse because they don't want to like compromise or actually listen to any sort of positive masculinity that happens, because they always have to like pull up their ideals, for example. That's going to be worse because under government you're also enabling the disenfranchisement that happens towards women, and that is exactly why it's worse. Proud to be CO.
Okay, thank you for that speech. Now to end the entire government case, I welcome the government with here.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, wait, let me just get my timer. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. We think the likelihood in opposition to actually consenting to all of the unpredictabilities of a relationship is rocky at best. Why? Going to my rebuttals first, about the process of falling in love and consenting to a relationship, right? We think that the process of falling in love and knowing your partner is only at first, right? I think you won't completely know a person, what they're like until at least like 3 months, right? When you see your partner, when they're angry or stressed, for example, or when they're experiencing burnout. This is the times where you actually find more sides of the person, right? Even the dark sides or the trauma or how they deal with anger, for example. When you're getting closer to a person, of course, you will have more incentive to want to show them the best side of yourself, right? Which is most likely why you only see the darker sides during a relationship instead of when you're getting closer to them. This is why in opposition, it's their likelihood of being able to consent to a whole relationship is very unlikely at best, right? Because we won't really know a person until we actually get into a relationship with them, right? I think negotiations will only happen later in opposition's house, right? But by then, you might already have developed a dependency, for example. Since you're already talking to this person so much, or you're having like night calls with them, you already form a sort of attachment deeper when you're already in a relationship with that person, right? And suddenly your decisions are already having with your partner in mind, right? This is dangerous because you will already have made a person change the trajectory of their life and future. Every decision they make will have their partner in the back of their mind, right? This is exactly why compromise happens in an irrational way in opposition. It's exactly because there is the composition of love, which makes people irrational and makes people not able to think that rationally about themselves and their priorities, right? Because their happiness is starting to be dependent on the person, because their serotonin comes from the relationship and the communication from this person, right? But before I go to my classes, just one more rebuttal about the marginalized things like patriarchy or positive masculinity, right? I think opposition is unfair in playing under this progressive kind of community, right? Where they think that just because there are a lot of social movements like feminism, suddenly men will still want to sacrifice their time and ambition just to want to be a stay-at-home dad as much as their wives, right? But even in Indonesia, the reality for most developing countries is that men will always have the last say in a relationship, right? Why? Because they can argue things like they have more possibility for climbing the social ladder and etc. Right? We think this leads to regret for women because the patriarchy makes it harder for women to actually have a say in what they want. Right? we think at least the relationships in our side have women actually being able to work hard for what they want and making a decision for themselves without actually having to listen to their partners and without ignoring the constraint of this patriarchy, right? Okay, going to my clashes. 2 clashes in here. First clash. Why is compromise harmful or shouldn't be preferred for relationships, right? First, we don't think it will be as smooth as opposition makes it out to be, right? I think having to compromise in the first place makes you having to sacrifice something in order for your partner to gain happiness or vice versa, right? We think this will lead to more regret later. Because when compromise is not normalized, people will want to protect their individuality and individual happiness, right? Every time they make a decision, it's not going to be the first option for them to compromise or sacrifice themselves. This is exactly what we want in a government house, where, for example, if your partner gets a job opportunity outside the country, like my first speaker said, you compromise to move with them even though you haven't finished your education or don't have a safety net in there, right? Well, in our side, because our first decision is just prioritizing ourselves, we choose LDR, where we still can have the same relationship with our partner, but we will have that mental stability and stability in life where we can actually have a good relationship without actually doubting ourselves and our identities, right? I'm gonna extend this later in my arguments. More on why it's likely that the compromise will be asymmetrical, right? Because this is such a big argument in our house on why it's going to be asymmetrical in our side. I think it's because first, many decisions, for example, like picking your university, well, you have a high school boyfriend, cannot be made symmetrically, right? There is no equal or middle ground to this picking a university or whatever, right? Most decisions in life are like this. There is usually no such thing as just the middle ground. You either pick a university the same as your boyfriend, or you can save the relationship, or you can save the relationship by trying to prioritize yourself and prioritize the university that you want to go to and is congruent with your dreams, right? So what happens in this side, right? We think that relationships, especially during rocky times, will make you hate your partner for what you compromise for them during that time, right? Because although initially, when you pick a university that's the same with your boyfriend, you might feel happy at first, right? Because your boyfriend is happy, so you feel happy. But this might not be the same later on, right? You might, when you're in the university, you might start to hate your boyfriend because, for example, for not letting you get to achieve your life to the fullest, there is regret and doubt that you kind of pick something else and you could have had a better life than this, than just changing the entire trajectory of your life for this one person, right? Why this is likely? First, because people grow out of their personalities, right? People's personality change, their selves change every 7 years. They grow out of old habits and often experience changes up to their life, which makes them rethink their life choices even more, right? We think actually reflecting back on this before the choices are made is the most important part in this debate, right? But 2, because relationship dynamics change. It's not only that the people change, but also the relationship dynamics change, right? What goes on in a relationship that makes one happy or the other not so happy will change in the future, right? We think exactly because of how dynamic people can change is exactly why compromise shouldn't happen in the first place. But more on the discussion of doubt, right? We think this kind of doubt and regret goes more than just doubt in your relationship, but there will be doubt about yourself and your identity as well. What do you mean by this? Let's just the example of the picking your university, for example. When you choose to stay in the smaller university just to stay with your boyfriend, not only will you doubt the relationship, but you will also doubt your identity. You will start to think, this is all I can do, this is all I can achieve, just because you're held back by this limited constraints of having to be in the relationship, right? We think exactly this will change how we look at ourselves and not just how we look at the relationship. But on the second of different power dynamics, right? I think we've seen that when people are in love, where people experience a lot of happiness and unpredictability, this makes them addicted to the person, right? Where people in relationships, exactly because they have different capabilities to how much they can love, because people have different capacities to how much they can love the other person. Maybe a person can love each other maybe 90% while the other is only 50%. There's a big possibility of just one party loving the other person more than they think about themselves, right? Take a look at our friends in relationships, for example, that compromise their time with friends just to hang out with their boyfriends, while their boyfriends is gonna play games and ignoring the girlfriend, right? We think this is more likely than you think. So what exclusivity we bring in our side, right? Exactly, we have less conflict and less resentment to the partner inside the relationship, exactly because we're already stable where we are right now, right? Because how much you love a person is dependent on how much you love yourself. I'm very proud to propose.
Now to close, thank you for that speech. Now to close the whole debate, I welcome the opposition wave.
Okay, wait 1 second. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Identity, framing, then two clashes. First, identity. What makes us different from opening opposition? First, I think opening opposition assumes the worst case scenarios where like dreams will change anyway and that's how their case can fly. No, we're not going to go there. We're going to actually engage why in and of itself, even though compromise doesn't exist and somehow you meet the best match of your life, like what happens in government side of the house, that is still not going to result in a good relationship. Second, we're going to prove even if the society is patriarchal, when there is one partner that has a tendency to be submissive, why this is still okay. But lastly, I think there is a missing framing here. The idea that in our side of the house, sure, there will be compromise. Some partners will need to sacrifice, some of their passion through communicative properties, i.e., through properly talking. Maida has clearly contextualized that. Therefore, there will be no like blackmailing and whatnot for this particular partner to lose that part of their identity. Why there is a worse alternative? Because the way I see it, because government has never brought clear mechanism alternative from their side of the house of what makes a good relationship, is that they're just going to rely on the idea of acceptance without any communicative properties, without any talking and no negotiation. That means they will have to opt in scenarios where inherently there's one partner that is stronger than the other. Therefore, there is no need for communications and whatnot to take place. There will be automatically a way for that particular partner for their identity to be accepted, somewhat more submissive, because there is no compromise, there's no communication whatsoever. So with that, two clashes here. First, on the idea why compromise is good, why compromise in and of itself is good. The idea of what makes compromise is necessary is the sacrifices that you make to it. You need to sacrifice your dreams, your belief, you need to change, you need to readapt your personality, and you need to work hard to allocate your life to your partner. Why do we think that this is important? This builds to one thing that relationship relies upon, and that is the idea of trust. The idea that you're willing to put forward your partner's need before you, the idea that you're willing to gamble by changing and revamping your personalities or your interest for your partner. Why is this important? Because when you first know your partner, particularly your relationship partner, often you haven't known them that well before. Or even in most cases, people meet their dates or like their partner because of like online dating, or meet them in cafes or club and stuff like that. You are still stranger, and there's no clear detrimental factors of what will make these people particularly loyal to you, what make these strangers loyal to you. This is where compromise comes, because when you see that this other stranger that you just met in the club and fought, particularly that was my story, is that this particular person is willing to change and puts a lot of effort to to accommodate their life to fit into yours. And why is it important in good relationship? For no 1 2 3 4 5 reasons. First, because it makes you feel special, it makes you feel safe, and it makes you feel that you are actually very worthy, and that you're someone that this particular person cherishes. But second reason, and this talks about the result, why is this then contribution from your partner particularly important? Because that will then not give you a mixed signal or a doubt where you feel like you're not the only person, that your partner might always be cheating because of the fact that of how much effort he puts into you. This is important because then when you know he gives 100% to you, you're also not hesitant to give 100% to your partner, for example. And but even if assuming this is only one small sacrifices, then why is it still significant? Given the idea that government has contextualized how much a dream means to that particular person, means one sacrifice that that person made, i.e., for example, missing one job slot to cater to their partner, already shows that the sacrifice is important. But thirdly, why is this then more important? Because that takes away the question that then becomes like the source of conflict in your partner. Because the idea is, if you, my partner, doesn't isn't willing to sacrifice this much of a time for me, then what am I to you? What's my significance of life to you? Or do you have somebody else? I think those suspicion and those mixed signal is what makes a relationship bad, because there will be no trust. You're not willing to put effort into the other because you're afraid that it's only you who's putting too much, and this then becomes the source of the conflict in a relationship. This becomes toxicity, where you will keep secrets from each other's and whatnot, because you just don't, there's just no communication and like visible concrete evidence of sacrifice on your side. But fourth reason why this is good is that the idea of the sacrifice and the journey that you go through together by communicating is exactly what makes you value your relationship. That means even if, let's say, you need to sacrifice something in the that means if, let's say, you need to sacrifice something pretty big, like let's say for a job, for like a job, because you're your partner also happens to be hired elsewhere, for example, in different places, but your partner's job pay is just significantly more than yours. We think that that's okay, because that is going to because that means your partner is going to feel like, oh, I have a partner here that is very valuable, that is willing to keep up with me, and that means there is going to be a guarantee retribution, because you see that your partner is devoted to you, and the idea that the world is so uncertain that no one else could be like this, no one else could be willing that hard to sacrifice so much for you is what's going to create a safe feeling, because there's this reciprocation coming from your partner. But then lastly, even if there's going to be something bad, you're more likely to opt into positive compromise solution, because there's a good precedence that you've had good compromises in the past. This means that you're more likely to go to therapy than opt and force your partner with no compromise, with no communicative properties, forcing your partner, shoving it on their throat to accept whatever new changes happens to you, because otherwise, if you can't accept this, bitch, I'm out. That's what's going to happen on government side of the house. But second, let's talk about the idea of why this will still work on even patriarchal side of the house. Firstly, erase CG's strawman responses to Maida's argument, because we never say that this works in the scenarios of progressive society. I think the reason why male chivalry can exist here, and why women can still be pampered and benefit even when they're the submissive one, when they need to do more sacrifices, is because of the idea that there's this notion that is put in men, because men are valued not for their looks, but by how much money they can make, but by how much they can actually protect their women, because women is someone that is important to them, and their social status is, for example, attached to, i.e., how much money they can make and how much they can spare it and give it to their women and pamper their women. Is the idea that when through chivalry, women can, for example, be cratered, because alternatively, before relationship, men can actually express, use their money for whatever, doing, going nights, drinking without curfew, because they have no curfew, because they're less likely to be raped, trigger warning, rather than women. But the idea that now they have to stay home, they have to save the money rather than spend it on games or drinkings, and instead pamper to their women, because the idea that the social status depends on how much they can pamper their women means that, yeah, women can be a gold digger and can benefit in this. This still works in patriarchal society. We oppose. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna give it over to Chacha.
All right, thank you so much. So that was the debate. We hope you enjoyed it. Next slide, please. All right. Wait. Yeah, there you go. So what just happened in general? What just happened is what you can see as the debate. Yes, that was the debate, ending with the feminism somehow. But I liked it anyway. As of right now, the judge is looking over the debate and is deliberating upon what happened, which is usually what happens after a debate. Usually takes around 5-10 minutes around there. And so, yeah, don't leave just yet, because after this, our judge will give you a OA, an oral adjudication, where I guess he will try to explain to you exactly what went and which teams, I suppose, won our triumph over the other, and why so, and how to judge the debate itself. So that if you're confused right now, this is your chance to understand what just happened. And yeah, but before that, because we're still waiting for our beloved Aju to decide upon his decisions, who do you guys think won and why? You may FCO did. I suppose yes. I think OG. Why do you guys think OG is fourth? State your reasonings. Yeah, on mic. Anyone, either you are anyone, literally. We're kind of chill here, don't worry. We won't bash on you or anything. We won't be like, your opinion is wrong or whatever. We have special thanks for Ani. We call upon Ranga. Time is yours. Thank you.
Right. Thank
you. Jadi bentar aku mau share PPT ya, karena aku aku bikin PPT so that kalian nggak cuma hear my voice because maybe it's kind of weird. So aku bikin PPT of how I weigh the debate. So hang on while I share my screen. Bentar. I'm going to type one last comparison. Bentar.
Anyway, guys, commission for the effort that our Aju has given. Claps in the chat. Where's the claps? I'm so sorry. All right, nice. Thank you.
Oke, sorry, bentar. Bentar. Ini kalau suaraku putus-putus, considering aku pakai IndiHome, I don't need to explain why that's a problem. Kalau suaraku mulai putus-putus, you can just like cut me in the middle of my speech. No, sorry, not speech. In the middle of me talking. Jadi langsung potong aja bilang kalau putus-putus, because I wouldn't know kalau kalian dengar atau enggak ya. So, alright. I guess, oh wait, share my screen, window, alright. So, kedengeran, kelihatan nggak ini?
Kelihatan.
Okay, set, kelihatan ya, right? So, thanks everyone. Jadi di sini, as what it said earlier, aku hanya akan ngasih summary. Firstly, what the speakers are saying, karena mungkin aku juga sadar. Oke, jadi ini maaf ya, aku maybe mishmash between English and Indonesia also, karena I'm not gonna like go full EFL elitist, because maybe not everyone understand English. Tapi ya udah, oke, regardless. Jadi pertama aku akan jelasin para speaker di debat tadi itu ngomongin apa sebenarnya, karena mungkin kalian kurang paham poin-poin amazing yang dibawakan oleh mereka. Ada mungkin juga term atau istilah-istilah yang mungkin kalian belum paham. Itu yang pertama. Namun yang kedua, aku juga akan jelasin gimana poin-poin tersebut tadi itu juga akan berkontribusi dalam kamu sebenarnya memenangkan debatnya. Tapi sebelum itu, ini kan sistemnya British Parliamentary. Jadi dalam British Parliamentary itu nggak kayak debat biasanya. Mungkin kalian tahu debat itu adanya menang versus kalah. Enggak, kalau di BP adanya itu ranking. Jadi kan timnya tadi ada 4. Jadi kalau lomba adanya di ranking 1, ranking 2, ranking 3, ranking 4. Biasanya di ranking berdasarkan kontribusinya dalam debat. Jadi aku akan ngasih spoiler kayak gimana caranya mencari tahu siapa yang paling kontributif dalam debatnya dan menjadi first rank. Tapi kalau kalian mau tahu lebih detail, join dulu makanya ya, spoilers. Oke, so general overview, kenapa ini penting? Karena ini penting ya, karena there are 8 people speaking for 7 minutes each, so I think it's also important. First off, menurutku apa yang debate-nya I think generally lacks. Menurutku ada 2 hal. Pertama, debatnya terlalu fokus membicarakan apakah kompromi itu hal yang oke, bukan membicarakan apakah kompromi itu property of a good relationship. I think, aku pikir mungkin ada benches yang punya attempt di sini, tapi sebagian besar debatnya berfokus terhadap kenapa kompromi itu oke, bukan tentang kenapa kompromi itu merupakan property dan merupakan bagian dari good relationship. Karena yang diinginkan mosinya bukan cuma kenapa kompromi itu oke, namun juga ada beban pembuktian tambahan, yaitu kenapa kompromi maksudnya adalah kenapa kompromi merupakan bagian dari relationship yang bagus. Seperti itu ya, sekiranya mudah dipahami mungkin. Terus yang kedua, kurang ada persetujuan karakterisasi mana yang benar, jadinya bisa saja juri memberikan kredit ke karakterisasi manapun yang maksudnya karakterisasi manapun yang diomongkan oleh speaker tadi. Karena misal opposition bilang bahwa kompromi ini nggak apa-apa karena ada proses diskusi dan lain sebagainya,
namun government juga mengatakan bahwa itu mungkin memiliki hal-hal yang sangat penting di dalamnya, maka dari itu akan sangat harmful bagi orang-orang yang ada di dalamnya. Nah, karena tidak ada persetujuan mana karakterisasi yang lebih benar dan karakterisasi mana yang lebih kuat daripada satu sama yang lain, ini mungkin akan membuat debatnya rawan untuk maksudku itu debatnya itu kayak rawan diutilize oleh eju-eju yang dismissive dan rawan diutilize oleh eju-eju yang maybe not experienced like me. Let's just dive straight in. Pertama, aku mau jelasin apa dulu yang dibawain opening government. Jadi mungkin some of you don't really catch what opening government tadi bilang. Aku bisa nangkep 3 hal utama dari 3 identity utama dari opening government. Pertama yaitu mereka mengatakan bahwa compromise dan kompromi itu sangat jelek karena yang dikorbankan pasti hal yang penting, karena kalau yang dikompromikan itu hal kecil, tentu tingkat signifikansinya juga sangat kecil. Terus yang kedua, mereka mengatakan bahwa mereka ingin menemukan partner yang paling cocok, memberikan kenyamanan dan lain sebagainya. Lalu opening government juga menjelaskan bahwa akan ada pihak yang sangat submisif dan juga ada yang sangat dominan misalnya, karena kamu terus-terusan memiliki kompromi berulang kali, maka dari itu tentu akan ada pihak yang tidak diuntungkan di sisi ini. Aku berusaha menyampaikan ini dengan bahasa yang paling mudah dan dalam term yang juga paling mudah. Semoga kalian bisa paham ya yang dimaksud opening government tadi itu apa. Jadi itu yang dibawain opening government. Apa yang dibawakan opening opposition sebagai perbandingan? Opening opposition membawa bahwa kalau yang dikarakterisasikan opening government adalah hubungan ini memaksa kamu untuk mengorbankan hal yang sangat penting, berarti kemungkinan besar hubungan tersebut adalah hubungan toksik. Maka dari itu opening opposition bisa mengatakan bahwa kamu bisa memiliki mekanisme untuk keluar dari hubungan yang toksik itu misalnya. Namun ini juga direspon sebenarnya juga oleh opening government mengatakan bahwa kamu susah untuk keluar dari toxic relationship karena ada pressure dari masyarakat dan lain sebagainya. Jadi itu yang pertama. Tapi yang kedua, yang menurutku ini the crux of the opening opposition case. What's the crux? Inti utama lah dari kasus opening opposition adalah mengatakan bahwa dalam kompromis ini ada proses, karena gak otomatis mencapai keputusan harus kompromis, maka dari itu lebih bagus daripada perbandingan di tim pemerintah, kamu sama-sama keras kepala dan tidak ingin mengorbankan apa-apa misalnya. Kemudian yang ketiga yang dibawa oleh opening opposition juga adalah kamu harus mempersiapkan skenario terburuk karena mungkin saja konflik ini terjadi kapanpun. Mereka juga merespon mengenai bahwa argumen dari opening government bahwa mimpi yang dikatakan opening government akan dikorbankan misalnya karena kamu harus setuju dengan partnermu terus-terusan. Ini tidak absolut karena mungkin mimpi dan interest mungkin terkadang berganti dan tidak selalu sama. Misalnya ketika kamu mungkin sekarang ingin jadi dokter, mungkin beberapa tahun ke depan kamu tidak ingin menjadi dokter misalnya. Jadi mereka opening opposition mengkarakterisasikan bahwa mimpi mungkin terus-terusan berganti dan mimpi itu tidak absolut sehingga mungkin tidak apa-apa untuk dikompromikan. Sekarang masuk ke the closing half, starting from closing government. Apa yang dibawa oleh closing government? Menurutku ada beberapa hal. Yang pertama, maaf ya, ini tulisanku belum komplit nih, tapi it's okay. Yang pertama yang dibawa closing government adalah kepentingan individu ini tuh adalah hal yang paling penting, karena misalnya dalam relationship kamu harus ada ketika ada partner yang lebih superior misalnya, mereka mengkarakterisasikan ketika mungkin ada partner yang lebih pintar, yang lebih lebih dominan misalnya, kepentingan individumu itu lebih penting karena dari situlah kamu bisa menemukan kebahagiaan yang lebih personal pada dirimu misalnya. Itulah yang dijelaskan oleh closing government. Namun yang kedua, mereka juga mengatakan bahwa akan ada penyesalan dan second guessing karena orang-orang yang melakukan kompromi ini akan merasa bahwa andai saja aku tidak melakukan itu, andai saja aku tidak melakukan hal yang diminta oleh partnerku misalnya. Closing government juga menambahkan karakterisasi ini dengan pembuktian bahwa orang berubah dan personality ini juga berubah, maka dari itu second guessing ini dan penyesalan ini akan lebih mungkin terjadi. Mengetahui bahwa personality terus berubah, maka dari itu orang mungkin saja menyesali keputusan mereka. Ini juga mungkin jika spoiler perbandingan, ini juga kenapa meskipun opening government tadi juga membawa bahwa kamu akan menyesal misalnya, closing government lebih membawa kenapa ini lebih sering terjadi, kenapa frekuensinya lebih sering, karena personality orang berubah, ya gitu-gitulah. Tapi yang ketiga, closing government juga membawa respon ke opening opposition tentang bahwa proses itu tidak absolut yang dikatakan opening opposition, karena tentu proses ini tidak jadi instan, perlu memerlukan waktu beberapa bulan, dan by that point kamu sudah memiliki attachment ke orang itu misalnya, dari itu proses ini tidak valid karena tentu sudah bias dan tidak objektif misalnya. Namun yang kedua, mereka juga mengatakan bahwa mimpi ini respon dari opening opposition yang direspon balik oleh closing government, mengatakan bahwa jikapun ada mimpi yang berubah-ubah misalnya, ini tetap penting untuk dilindungi karena ya memang secara individu ini sesuatu yang sudah mereka invest dan sesuatu yang memberikan kebahagiaan personal bagi mereka. Oke, terakhir apa yang dibawakan oleh closing opposition? Closing opposition bahwa pertama, relationship itu lebih sustainable karena kamu bisa menurunkan ego kamu, maka dari itu relationship akan lebih sustainable dalam kedepannya. Namun yang kedua, extension utama yang dibawakan closing opposition adalah pria dalam area konservatif yang memiliki positive masculinity. Let me explain this in a layman term. Maksudnya positive masculinity itu adalah ketika misalnya seorang pria mengatakan bahwa real man itu yang respect woman, real man itu yang menghormati wanita, itulah yang dimaksud positive masculinity yang dimaksud oleh closing opposition. Dan closing opposition mengatakan bahwa akan lebih baik ke wanita-wanita di area-area ini karena narasi ini mencegah untuk mencegah adanya kemungkinan wanita-wanita ini direndahkan oleh pria-pria yang ada di area-area yang disebutkan tadi. Namun yang ketiga, closing opposition juga menjelaskan bahwa proses komunikasi lebih baik, mereka ini yang jargon tentang communicative property. Ini mereka mengatakan bahwa kamu akan merasa lebih dihargai misalnya ketika ada proses kompromi dan lain sebagainya. Okay, so that's the general overview of what's being brought by all 4 of the benches yang dibawa oleh 4 tim. Obviously ini not very detailed, I missed quite a few things, tapi just so that kalian dapat the main idea, I've highlighted those for you. So, okay. Ini hanya spoiler ya, kalau kalian mau tahu how do you properly adjudicate a debate. I'm not a good adjudicator myself, tapi ya, if you want to know how a debate get properly adjudicated, kalian harus join EDS UGM dulu. By that, kalian nanti baru bisa tahu gimana comparison yang bagus, gimana comparison yang fair, dan seterusnya. Jadi di sini aku cuma spoiler aja, aku ambil comparison OO dan opening government, dan yang kedua adalah closing government versus closing opposition. Jadi I compare like the cross bench di opening and also closing. Jadi menurutku gimana caranya? Ini bukan decision, decision ya. Ini cuma aku mengatakan kayak how does a judge might think ketika dia nge-assess debat ini. Although this might not be true karena I'm not a good judge, tapi udah. So how does a judge might value opening government versus opening opposition? Menurutku berbasis 3 hal. Pertama, mekanisasi manakah yang lebih mungkin terjadi, bahwa apakah kompromi yang sangat sulit dicapai itu mungkin terjadi di semisal dikatakan oleh opening government bahwa kompromi tersebut sangatlah sulit tercapai, misalnya apakah tidak ada proses dalam mencapai kompromi tersebut. Namun yang kedua, apakah yang dikhawatirkan oleh opening government mengenai mimpi pekerjaan, apakah hal tersebut merupakan hal yang absolut dan tidak bisa dirubah misalnya. Dan yang ketiga, jika pun senario opening government itu benar bahwa kamu bisa menemukan partner ideal, seberapa mungkinkah hal tersebut terjadi? Karena memang secara default itu secara umum sebagai manusia kita tentu sulit menemukan orang yang 100% kompatibel dengan diri kita. Jadi ini mungkin 3 matriks yang mungkin bisa digunakan oleh seorang judge untuk nge-decide who got the upper hand, apakah opening opposition atau opening government. Though again, this might not be detailed. Tapi yang kedua tentang closing government dan closing opposition. Pertama mungkin seorang judge mungkin akan consider the clash between whether or not ini gonna be sustainable. Especially kita closing opposition membawa tentang sustainability is important for you to have a good relationship in general. So like how does this actually compare dengan the extension from closing government about mimpi individu ini bisa dicapai, misalnya kenapa kebahagiaan internal itu lebih penting daripada relationship yang sustainable eventually, seperti itu kan. Tapi yang kedua adalah konteks mengenai penghapusan behavior pria-pria dalam daerah yang konservatif dan juga memiliki positive masculinity itu, mungkin some judges bisa menghitung kontribusi dari closing opposition ini, tapi some judges might also credit the response from closing government tentang konteks-konteks yang dibawakan oleh closing opposition ini. Tapi yang ketiga, some judges might question the extension from closing government about mimpi individu yang bisa dicapai secara middle ground. Mungkin some judges might question how is it that it's likely to achieve, given that people are not willing to compromise, and how is it that it's still menguntungkan kedua belah pihak, given that it's only going to memenuhi one of them, karena ya by default ini mimpi yang individualistik. Ya, that's what I'm trying to say. Jadi probably itu aja what I want to say. So like mungkin kalau kalian ada question, you can ask me, or like ya udah, maybe if not, it's already 9. Mungkin kalian juga udah ngantuk.